I'm going to do a short intro, guys. So welcome to the Health Made Simple show. I'm here with our host, Dr. Bart Precourt, who has been a healthcare practitioner for over 20 years, practicing a range of modalities, including functional nutrition, lab testing, chiropractic. And tonight he's here to answer your questions. I'm going to do the best with the voice I have. So I think we're going to dive straight into the questions. He also works around the world. If anybody wants lab testing, nutrition, things like that, he actually works with everybody on Zoom. Is that correct? You now work across the country?
Yeah. So again, one of the blessings of COVID that now everybody is like experts in Zoom. So we do live Zoom every week. Karen, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You know, and again, I said this many times, but I really like the format. I don't think I'm going to go back to the old one because it gives us like this nice bonding connection moment that we have. A lot of people are in their own living rooms. Yeah. And so there's I feel like in a weird way, it's taken things to another level in terms of the, I ain't saying it like this way, but the doctor-patient relationship, but the conversation that we get to have and, you know, the depth of it all. So yeah, and anything. And we can do lab tests too. So we can send lab tests out, and, you know, and just a little reminder for the audience, we're in that window right now where most people are going to downregulate, not this group, but a lot of people will downregulate their health over these next 50, 60 days going into the first of the year. Yet, because we are all moving in the direction of trying to become superhuman, we're thinking, man, we're going to try to peak on January 1st, do a cleanse at the beginning of the year. So we kick it off the first Monday, I think is January 3rd.
Yeah.
And if you typically run labs like once a year, pretty cool, you know, like pretty good idea, especially if you're, you know, no longer 20, we'll say, and you like to run labs, you like to use that data to help you make your next strategy with your health, et cetera. Do it after the cleanse. And we'll probably even run like some like cleanse special, even for labs like we did last year. So kind of keep your eyes out for those things. That's when I typically recommend to do it. Run your labs when you're possibly at your best. And that is really the best benchmark, because when we run labs, when we know we're not doing good, then we should almost expect the labs not to be good, but they're not always giving us a true insight of how we are functioning. So that little schedule there. Next 50, 60 days, hold the line, get really strong. January 3rd, which I think is the first Monday, we'll kick off. We're going to do that private Facebook page. Of course, we're getting some new twists, some new, you know, new recipes out this year, some new things we're adding to it. And if you're local, man, we're have this totally dialed in at our cafe, where you can preset foods you can pick up for a day. So we got it really dialed in. So it's going to take it to another level and just see how easy it is to essentially eat awesome, keep moving towards superhuman. And let's make next year, like, I see next year's just an awesome year. Like we survived, you know, like the 2 years of chaos, and now it's time to thrive. So that's kind of the schedule over the next 2 years, or next 2 years.
Yeah, I love it. Very exciting.
So,
all right, do you want to start with the clinical insight we were talking about before?
Insight a little bit. In my experiment here is failing a little bit, but nonetheless. So my clinical insight is, and it's hard to catch up. Well, give me 2 seconds. I'm going to toss this guy out here. Yeah. He's going to leave. All right, I'm back. So it's hard to catch up when it comes to our health. And I want to dive a little deeper into what that really means. So inevitably, I see people that will, and I think this goes for everyone listening. And again, welcome everyone. Love having you here. If you do have questions, again, same thing. If you're on Facebook, send them through. They'll get them to Karen. Karen somehow portray them, made through sign language, give them to me. If you're here on Zoom, just put them in the, I guess the chat below. And then she'll get them to me as well. So a clinical insight over the last couple of days, we'll say since the last time we met here, it's really hard to catch up. And what do I mean by that? The superhuman strategy is really a proactive strategy. And it's not always the sexiest thing to do. And it's not always the funnest thing to do. And that's the reality. The challenge is when we know we have this, and I think this goes for a little bit of all of us. When we know we have something going on, you have pain, you have weight gain, you have hormonal imbalances, you're not sleeping, and you just keep pushing it down the road. And you just keep pushing it and pushing and pushing down the road. How does that look? You might have a sleeping issue and you're taking sleeping medications. You know, sleeping medications doesn't fix the problem, but you want that instant gratification, so you push it down the road. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I'll bring up a particular case, and she might even be listening today, so I think she'll understand, because this is exact conversation. She's an avid runner, cyclist, literally works out 2 to 4 hours a day. And she's been doing this forever. Like, she loves to exercise, loves to work out, super great health, probably in her 50s, like maybe even her 60s, I don't know, probably 50s, but always been super active. And over the last several months, been having back pain build up. And when we get her adjusted and stuff like that, it goes better. But she doesn't necessarily live in my area full time, so she only gets adjusted on occasion. And in between, to keep up her exercise, she takes a leave. And I get it. So I totally get it. Her taking a leave lets her exercise. And we've had the conversation in the beginning, and this is what I mean by it's hard to catch up once we get behind here. When you know that you're bridging a gap, understand you have to pay for that gap. When you use a credit card, you have to pay it back. I don't think the healthcare system and healthcare providers are honest enough when they say point blank. So tonight I want to be point blank with everyone. When you take drugs, medication, and do surgery, you still have to pay back. You do not get to skip. So there's a couple situations that showed up this week in this scenario. Now, the leave, and it kept running. And the challenge here is so now have you made it worse? In the moment we use something, and listen, you guys know, like, I'm not anti-drug or anti-medication, yet I am pro-thinking, proactive thinking, critical thinking when it comes to the human body. I would say that the majority of the things that I see and most doctors see are preventable. But it is our unwillingness to deal with them now, because it's not sexy and it's not fun all the time. So we want that instant, like, gratification, that instant satisfaction, that we get to change the entire thing right here, right now, so we can just keep doing what we want to do. And I get it, because I'm part of that. I call that the knucklehead syndrome. In this particular scenario, she would run, and I'd be like, you can't live off of this leave, because not only will it's a false sense of security, you're probably doing more damage to your body, to your spine, to the disc, to the joints, and you're creating more inflammation. Never mind the impact on the leave on the stomach and downregulating nutrients and changing the pH in the gut. And you can't uptake your proteins as well. Therefore, you can't heal as well. So many things, so many chain reactions take place in that. So where we are at now we're in a situation, perfectly healthy woman, real good diet, all those kind of stuff. But now we're in the environment of X-rays and MRIs and multiple doctor visits, from orthopedic now to spine specialist. And this is the pattern, folks. This is what happens. And when you're in it and you're this far along, you started way over here, you started, way down here months ago, days, weeks ago, and then you took one little step that was in the wrong direction. By the time you're way down here, now getting posed with the questions of, man, we might have to make this surgical. You're so deep into it, you can't even think straight. You can't see what is really taking place. So I think I got through. I don't know, because I don't know. I'll know through the actions. And I fully understand and comprehend what's taking place. But I guess my clinical insight for everyone today is this: listen, you're going to pay the piper. Every single time you take a pain medication so you can continue the action that was causing you the pain, you will pay the piper, and most likely you'll have to double down. And I want to listen, I'm not talking about just getting out of pain and lying in bed. If you're using pain medications so you can keep doing the thing that hurt to do, you will pay the piper. Any doctor who tells you anything different, they're lying right to your face. Because if I take pain medications so I don't feel my knee, I will make my knee worse.
Yeah, so give us an update on your knee.
Oh, knee update. All right. All right. So just another, Yeah, this is pretty cool. So I shared with everyone a little bit about my knee, and I've, all through my practice and my journey of health and my life journeys, I've always, the best that I could, I've always tried to look at, especially when it comes to my physical body, my ailments is part of the lessons that I can use to help lead others as much as they suck. And I've had some significant back problems, significant shoulder problems. I mean, I can just go through my body. I've had some significant problems. And and other things, asthma, just all this stuff. And I've always tried to, like, then not in the moment, but when I get out of the storm a little bit, to see, well, how is this going to serve me? So when I was sharing with my staff today that when I first hurt my knee, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't be able to talk about my wife, but she could see that I couldn't walk around the house. And it was very humbling because there's a dog that I have that one of our dogs can't go up and down the stairs. So I have to carry him. And I literally had to ask my wife to carry the dog up and down the stairs. And it sounds like no big deal, but it was a massive big deal to me. It like hurt my pride, and like it like really messed with me. It humbled me, being like, what the freak? And putting my doctor's cap on, I was like, I know what's going on. I tore both sides of my meniscus. And I'm thinking to myself, there's no, and my brain was not in a good place. So it probably wasn't for close to 2 weeks that I really shared with anyone that I couldn't do anything. I couldn't, like getting up and down the stairs was difficult. Getting out of my truck was difficult. And then finally, when I could like take enough humble pie, I'd be like, yeah, I'm not training right now. And that was hard for me to say. And so I understand when anyone has an injury, like there's some like sometimes it makes you retreat a little bit. So in that time, Karen, when the whole time, my knee was definitely not healing because I was not mentally in a good place. And this is important, even in this clinical insight. And this actually works perfect. Thanks for asking that question. The whole time when I asked the girl today, I said, well, have you taken any time off? She said yes. And she's very specific, almost angry, and used the word frustrated several times. If you take time off and you are literally tapping your watch, looking at the clock, being like, there's a week, that's 2 weeks, I'm not better, you're not healing. You might as well go do something, because that's not healing. This is a mind-body connection. How you move, how you eat, how you think. They all need to be together. So my healing clock in those first 2 weeks had not begun. Yes, I was taking time off, but my mind wasn't in the right place to literally do some healing. Typically, when I have an injury, which I've had many, the first thing I said, this will heal. My body heals. I'm a master healer. I heal fast. And I just repeat that until it happens. And most of the time it does. And it gets me motivated to take the right actions, etc. These first 2 weeks, I was not there. And it was interesting. I shut a lot of things down, even things that didn't involve my knee, like my push-up routine and stuff like that. I just stopped doing it. Like I wasn't in a good mental place. And it made me like compassionate for a lot of people that when things don't go wrong, we have pain, physical, mental, emotional, could be, that we get derailed. And that's where our tribe is so important, and understanding kind of the bigger picture of things. So 2 weeks go by, nothing, I didn't do anything, but I was definitely not healing. Another 2 weeks went by. So I was about in my 4th week. And I think I mentioned this last time, before I could finally say, this will heal. I don't know how it's going to heal. This is going to heal. It might heal through surgery. It might not, whatever it may be, but this will heal. So really at about 4 weeks is when my clock of time off started. Most physical injuries need at least 8 to 10 weeks. Nobody likes to hear that. Most physical injuries need 8 to 10 weeks. And if you're doing all kinds of stuff and you're listening to, I don't know, like a Joe Rogan podcast, and these dudes are doing this incredible stuff and they have every resource available to them, awesome. It might not be as much. And I have a lot of resources too. But most people, you damage something, musculoskeletal system, to get back into the high function, where you can start to train again, you're looking at mostly 8 to 10 weeks. But my 4 weeks went by and I was at 0. So then I just started. So now we're probably six weeks, or maybe not even 4. So I'm about 8-9 weeks since the injury. And the weirdest thing happened last week, where I finally just got my knee got range of motion back. So I have not been able to do what's called child's pose. I have not been able to bring my heel to my butt I can't even go to yoga class, and I'm still not there yet. But trust me, that's all I want to do is train. All I want to do is work out. But it was so interesting when I let go of the time frame and then I was able to get my mind on board. I now know that this will heal one way or another. I don't know that I can still avoid surgery, but if you were to ask me in week 4 if I was going to have surgery, and this is the part I want everyone to hear, because I hear so many conversations that say, I had to have surgery. My doctor said it was blank. Absolutely no doubt about it. If you'd asked me in week 1 through 4 if I was going to have surgery, it was a 95% yes. Now I'd say that I'm on 90%, an 80 to 90% no. And that's what time does. That's what Dr. Quiet does. That's what me sitting with my thoughts. That's what me sitting and like listening to the pouty wowdy part of it. Why do I share that with you guys at all? One, it's a good story for me to hear, but it's a reminder. I've been doing this for 25 years, Karen, and I see the biggest challenge out there is the impatience. I don't care if it's a sinus infection, a throat issue, whatever.
Yesterday I couldn't do anything.
Couldn't do anything.
I said with you, and luckily it's only one day. It's not a thing. I actually let it go quite quickly. It was okay. But especially in the past, I've gotten super frustrated even by one day. I was a bit frustrated in the morning and then I just gave up because I literally couldn't do anything. I was just not useful to do anything. But it's frustrating. You don't even want to give a day. Like, how much do we just want every day to be able to go?
Yeah, 100%. We're human and we're built off of the idea right here, right now. Like, it needs to be fixed. Do you know how many people tell me that I'm not good with taking time off? You know that, Dr. Bart. I get it.
No one is. No one's good with taking time off.
But if there's something that I learned, there's to know when to push and when to the back, and which is going to be one of the questions tonight. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into that. Yeah. That conversation goes on to anything. So I'm talking about pain tonight. Maybe someone doesn't relate to that at all, but listen, weight gain.
Yeah.
Weight gain happens over time. Weight loss happens over time. And it's where we start and the little things that we do along the way that often we forget. We forget that, oh, yeah, it's right. 6 months ago, I went on a double round of antibiotics. Listen, I'm not antibiotics, but most likely after all these years of doing, especially clinical nutrition and functional understanding what's going on with the microbiome, I typically see people who do antibiotics 6 months later start to gain weight. Because the microbiome has a dysbiosis and because it didn't hurt in the moment. And why did they take the antibiotics? Most of the time, Karen, because they're about in the scenario you are now. They're uncomfortable. The doctor says, hey, you got a little bit of a sinus infection. And heaven forbid, you're uncomfortable for 2, 3, 4 days.
Well, as I was sharing, the amount of people yesterday that were like, even just, take some paracetamol, take Nurofen, do you need some cough syrup? Do you want me to go get you cough syrup? Because I'm coughing, but I don't need any of those things. I really needed to spend the day in bed.
Yeah, and support what generates health, and it's and those are two different things. And the truth of the matter is, in health, the health practice, and in the health journey that we're all on, everyone that's listen to us tonight or listen to us down there as recording, you're only listening because you're on a health journey. And health journey, quite frankly, there's very, very little instant gratification. And that's something that we just kind of accept because that the gratification comes from the fact that you're moving in the right direction. So for example, lifting weights is a process to get stronger, correct? Right? Good nutrition is a process of, dialing it in week after week, month after week, year after year, continue to learn your body and the nutrients to put into it. The yoga practice being tight muscles, a tight body. It's a journey. There's no one yoga class that boom, instant satisfaction, instant gratification. But we do those things when we start to add up these processes, and that's what they all of them are. The flip side, Karen, would be a medication. Yeah. Instant satisfaction. But that's the same thing with alcohol and drugs and stuff like that. You take it and you instantly get to change your state. Yeah. And I think collectively we have become a little wimpy. And as a result of it, we need things instantly to change who and what we are. Otherwise, we can't handle that situation.
We're very wimpy.
Yeah, we're definitely very wimpy. And I'm not saying there's not a time and place, but I think we use most of those things. The more I practice, the more I think this becomes prevalent. I think we use most of those things in the wrong time and in the wrong place. And then, of course, surgeries, we can't go back. So I will be pulling out a lot of other options prior to having surgery. And I've already been told by some of my friends who are orthopedics, Bart, and this was said about my shoulder. And I'm not knocking. I'm not saying this isn't the scenario. I've already been told, yeah, I can't fix this one, buddy. But we don't know. And most people, again, that opportunity. So if you're dealing with anything right now, I want to say two things you got to incorporate: Dr. Time and Dr. Quiet. Dr. Quiet is the one that lets you sit in your stuff for a little bit. And we pick Dr. Quiet. Yeah.
Well, Sean says you were off because the Red Sox beat the Yankees in the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, Sean's not my friend anymore. So that's a good example. So shout out to my friend Sean. And like friendships are not instant gratification. They are a process, right? So Sean's a good buddy of mine, even though he likes the worst team in the world. But it's the process that you have in developing friendships that gives you the satisfaction of having them for a lifetime. So many of the things in our life, if we step back and don't look for that instant gratification, then we'll do much, much better in getting to that next level, that level of being superhuman. So I think that was a long-winded version of my clinical, insights this week. I'm being maybe a little more patient and knowing that it's hard to play catch up, especially when we're not 20 anymore. And knowing, and knowing that if you are trying to avoid what deep down you have to face, you end up paying double for it. So I know that was a long-winded explanation. So with that being said, let's some of the questions about that we've received this week.
Yeah. But I think we need that reminder all the time, because when we're in it, we forget, right? Just what you were saying with your knee. Even though you know it, you forget. You need to be told all the time.
Yeah. And that was just the one. I just did the one cyclist, but there's a couple others literally just this week where they couldn't exercise, so they ran off to the doctor. And they are not doctor people. But because they had we had this thing down here called red tide, and it's like this seaweed that comes.
Algae.
It's like an algae, yeah. So it gets in the air. It's very detrimental to our lungs. And it triggers your innate immune system, which is, remember, tears, runny nose are all part of the innate immune system. And many of us don't like when the innate immune system has something to say. So if you're out in the red tide, and you could be literally, 500 yards off the beach, you didn't have to be in the water. When that happens, literally runny eyes, coughing, and all this kind of stuff. And people that stayed in it develop a little bit more of a lung issue. I've seen bad cases of bronchitis and stuff. And I always encourage people, listen, just stay away from the red tide. Yet there are some close friends that, they got beat up by the red tide, decided to go to the doctor to reduce the symptom so they can get back to doing the things they wanted. Yoga and exercise and stuff like that. And you don't get to push that stuff off. You just have to pay for it later. So let's dive in.
All right. Next question. So this one was emailed in, and they say, "Hi, I love your show and listen each week." So we love that. Thank you for all the expertise and perspective you so generously share. Question is, as part of leveling up, do you recommend eliminating protein powders from a smoothie, since protein powders are a processed food? I use a protein powder that is organic, non-GMO, keto, vegan, gluten-free, soy-free, etc. Thank you.
Okay. So great question. I love that this person is looking for level after level after level. So I often view the protein powders not as a replacement for being able and have the capacity to eat animal proteins or whatever, or vegetable proteins, chicken, egg, fish, meat, beef, whatever, burger, steak, whatever it may be, but rather as a supplement and maybe for convenience, but still falls into the category of God's garden. So, and it sounds like they dialed it in. So they sound like they had something that was still a whole food brand. It was, like a whole food material. It could have been whey protein, et cetera. It could have been a pea protein or hemp. So that's still the standard, is that it comes from God's garden. And maybe it's processed, but it's not manipulated from what it truly is. Nothing's being added to it in terms of chemicals. We're not down regulating, we're not separating it. But if it still stays in that whole food process, fantastic. Do I think that you need to eliminate it? I don't think there's anything wrong if you do, and meaning that you are doing so good and getting plenty of other natural resources, like you're eating, chicken and tuna and fish and all the different varieties. Awesome. But I still see it more as a supplement, Karen, something that like our supplement, like our whole food supplements, right? They've been processed technically into a supplement. They take the carrot or the bovine liver, et cetera, and extract out of it, but they're still whole food. So I think that's how I'll leave that one. So you could take it out if you want, but view it more as a supplement.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, next question. My 24-year-old friend in Atlanta has struggled with severe insomnia since she was in high school. Ambien didn't help at all, and now her doctor has prescribed Seroquel, which also hasn't helped at all. Recently, she visited a functional medicine doctor who said her nervous system was stuck in sympathetic mode and suggested Olprimer, DHA, and Mintran by a standard process. What would you suggest for someone who can't turn their mind thoughts off at night to sleep?
Okay, so 24 years old since high school, so we'll say since she's been 13 or 14, so a good decade of her life, almost half her life, unable to sleep. The doctor suggests that she is stuck in sympathetic dominant. That's when you're almost like in fight or flight, and that is a big challenge. And the way we really kind of look at that is, you have a hard time falling asleep, staying asleep, or you're waking up tired. Typically, what we'll see people that are stuck in sympathetic dominance. So if that person's listened who sent in this question, I'll tell you, the doctor sounds like they're right on in doing this, but if they're stuck in sympathetic dominance, they will have a hard time falling asleep. And using those other medications, you just have to pay for the fiddler. Even if those, you would have to pay for those later, even if they did work. So in a weird way, good that they didn't. So now you're taking another direction that will get into the root cause. And so they're looking to do it through two ways of helping the brain. Olprima is a very, very high dose of DHA. So the doctor really nailed it here. They were going to add more fatty acids to the brain, and then something called Mintran. And Mintran stands for mineral tranquilizer. And it is whole foods, all minerals. So this is something we use often. I use it, I could use this in like night terrors. I use this in ADD and ADHD cases. The dosing is going to be real important here. Super high dose. That being said, Karen, those are very, very supportive. I would probably add in something here. I'd go with two things we've talked a lot about on these shows. One, to break that pattern of the sympathetic dominance before bed. So sometime between dinner and bedtime, I would add kava, and I'd go strong on this. The beauty about kava is that it kicks in a couple minutes, like 15 minutes, and wears off in a couple hours. In this situation, though, if she's stuck in sympathetic dominance, it'll help her physical body start to unwind and let her mind relax. And then, of course, we do all the things, get off her phone and all those things that go with it. Wouldn't have her task out too much. Like, as much as I would want to like incorporate breathing and stuff, I would probably at this moment rely heavily on the vitamins and herbs, because she's already thinking too much. When anyone who's ever had insomnia or any sleeping conditions, once it gets in your head, it's a slippery slope. It's very difficult. So I'd probably untask her for those. I just make sure the environment was good, cold, dark, quiet. And then I would add kava, and I would dose that up. I'd start at 2, but I'd be willing to go 4, 5, 6. And right after that, my next herb would be ashwagandha forte. Super good. She could start taking the ashwagandha during the day to downregulate some of that sympathetic dominance. I'd start there, but I will say that I think the doctor, I think that was great advice. I think she's probably in really good hands. And that was probably a good starting point. So the doctor may even have this strategy. It might be just deciding, I'm going to start slow and then work up the ladder. And I'll do that often too. So sometimes I don't throw everything in the kitchen sink at it. And then there's other ones, if there's more down the road, there are other things that work really good. You got CBD that could be very effective. I would go to that. It's kind of like my third or fourth one that I like to go to. But those guys right there, the kava, interrupt that sympathetic dominance. Ashwagandha will do the same thing.
Okay, and I've got links for the ashwagandha and the Mintran in the chat, but if somebody wants to get Kava, they can get in touch with the office.
They're going to need to get it through their doctor, and they could certainly get it through us. You just have to send us an email and just say, Dr. Bart Show, and then we'll send you a code, like what we call a patient code. So we've had like a direct one-on-one correlation, and then we can send you a code that will give you full access. So those of you who don't have that yet, it's kind of, we'll give it to anyone that's, listening to our show. Just send us that email, and that'll give you full access. When we talk about certain, especially some of these herbs, Karen, that we talk about, you can't always get them unless you work with me directly already, or you have that code so you can order directly through their website. And and because some of them are a little bit stronger, some of them have a very good medicinal impact on people.
We have a follow-up question to that. What about melatonin? I have the same sleep issues.
Yeah, as I've kind of spoken about melatonin before, I kind of stay away from melatonin. Simply, it is a hormone. So we're really acting in the world of like hormone replacement therapy at that time. And if we start giving them melatonin, yes, it may make them sleep, but we're going to downregulate how the pineal gland is releasing that melatonin. So then we got to pay for that. Like, we're going to have to pay for that later. We're going to have to figure out how to make that. And those minerals that are needed, like things you get in Min-Tran, like the doctor recommended, and good gut health. So I would still suggest that protocol right there. Melatonin, again, can be a slippery slope. And listen, I know there's a lot of other practitioners who completely disagree. They say, Bart, whatever it takes to sleep, you sleep. I agree that sleep is one of the most important things, but we're trying to become healthy individuals that can sleep fine. And we want things to support it, but not necessarily drive it. And that melatonin will drive that action. So I'm hesitant, although I have a lot of people, not a lot, but I do have some people that come to me that are currently on it. And I don't necessarily make them come off of it, but I do want them to experiment how they can do without melatonin. And they should be able to do fine. And the challenge is most of the time they can't.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Let's do the next question. How quickly do vitamin D levels drop in the fall and winter? You guys are coming into your fall and winter.
Yeah. So our sun has already changed, so it's already strong through the course of the day. So we will inevitably all start producing less vitamin D. And this is traditionally why you would see like people get, flu season and illnesses in this part of the year. So the simple answer is literally within 24 hours, you can take vitamin D and start to get some uplift. The vitamin D, I'll see people start to die within 30 days of getting out of the sun. Now I go outside a lot. I'm still in my yard all day long, on the weekends, yet already my tan is gone. So it just tells me I'm in the sun less. So I got to expect my levels of D are going to start to plummet. So, this is whoever's asking the question. It's a good question because in the winter time, like the fall into winter, all the way to like the spring would be a good time to take extra. It's kind of difficult to get vitamin D from food by themselves, by itself. So taking, and there's another great thing you can do, Karen. It's so easy to test. There's an at-home, literally a finger prick test you can do. And if people want to call the office, I think it's like $60 or $70. But this is a really good one to know where you're at. So again, we're not playing catch up. This is like a good proactive superhuman thing. You just check your vitamin D level, see where you're at. And if you need to bump up, you figure out like how much more I want to take up, and then you test it again. Give it another 60 days, and then test it once again. If they're doing their labs in January with us, we tested on that test anyways. But it's easy. Like I said, you can just test your vitamin D. It's an at-home test, kind of cool. You prick your finger, and then a couple of days you get your results back. And from what I've seen right now, it's accurate. So I like the results that we're getting right now, and I use it myself. Sometimes I don't want to run my whole blood panel or go off and get a blood draw. So I'll just monitor that. And I'll tell you, and I had this conversation with someone in the office today. We're reviewing some lab work. Someone brought it in. I don't typically review it in the office. They said, hey, doc, look at this. They wanted me to look at some other stuff. And I was looking at their vitamin D levels in the 30s. And that's not okay. Like, it'll show up as normal on the labs, but a benchmark is about 50. I like to see those numbers between probably 50 and 80 would be ideal, no higher than 100. And I've had some people have concerns. Oh, I heard you can take too much and make you sick. I've yet to see anybody's.
Everybody's so deficient.
Yeah, which is crazy because there's so many people taking it now. But I literally haven't taken a test yet this year. And some people are taking a lot, 10, 15,000 IUs a day. I have yet to take a single test this year that I've said is too high. I think the highest has been my own. And again, I'll experiment with these things sometimes and maybe take a little bit more than I need to. But I was just trying to get a sense for really this year I didn't change my supplementation. I changed my sun exposure this year.
Okay.
And it gave me some really good levels this year. So now for me, I'm not going to have the same sun exposure. So I can only anticipate that my levels will drop. So my vitamin D supplementation will go up. And again, real easy test. You can contact the office. We can send it out. You can just come by and grab one.
Okay. So just call the office. You can ship it out.
Yeah. Just call the office, ship it out. Or if they're local, they can just come by.
Okay, cool. All right. Let's go on to the next question. How do you send love to somebody you know is going through a challenging time without making it as though you feel sorry for them?
And it's a good question too. How do you basically support someone without making them feel bad that you're supporting them? I think that's what I'm kind of hearing. So this is really interesting. As a healthcare practitioner, this is something that, to me, is something that's so important that we do, because sometimes you have to give news that isn't good. And sometimes you are the first person to hear news that's not good. And this could be anything in life, Karen. This could be someone passing, a loved one passes and you just don't know what to say. So I want to answer this and everyone take this for what it's worth and maybe listen to it, because we get our strength and our support from other people. That's the reality. It is our tribe that really drives us up or drives us down. At the end of the day, it's who we're around is so critical in our lives, which also means the words they use and how they do or don't talk to us is super important. So I'll give you an example and I'll share this with you because it's real life one. So someone in our lives, they had a miscarriage. And in the miscarriage, it'd be real easy to say, because this is very common for women out there, super common, to say, oh my God, I'm so sorry for your loss. And that sounds good, right? That sounds like a respectable thing to say. The challenge is when we really understand the energy of that conversation, the receiver of that information, unfortunately, has to revisit the loss. And they feel those words, I'm really sorry for your loss. And every time we do that, I understand when we say that what we're meaning, but the receiver of that, who's in the despair, that's not in their best place, and energetically is kind of off, they have to receive that. And we actually are pushing them back down in the hole. Instead of helping drag them back out of a tough spot, we're pushing them back in. They have to relive that. Sorry for my loss. Yes. And they go through that whole thing. If the ears receive it, the brain thinks about it, and then it has to kind of relive it. So in those situations, we can shift and do our best to lead at the same time showing compassion and sympathy versus just pure sorrow. And it may look at something like, hey, listen, and as a practitioner, these are the things that I've had to say 1,000 times, and I've screwed them up 900 times. Like, I promise you. So there's no one perfect way to do it. And I would say, always come from your heart, and then always ask yourself, did I leave them in a higher place than I found them? And this takes practice, Karen, because and most of the time, the good news is when we've come across people who've had tragedy in their life, most of the time, we in advance know it. So we can practice. We can think about what we're going to say to them. And if we think about the idea, am I leaving them in a higher place or am I pushing them back in the hole? That's how we can really, be an awesome member of the tribe. So maybe in a scenario, someone's lost someone, say, listen, you and I both know there's a higher power here and you're going to get through this too. In those words, they still feel my compassion. They still feel my sympathy and sorrow, yet the words are significantly different. This one, those little words lift them up, and the other ones make them revisit and go back down the hole. So I get this conversation because, and just like you and I were speaking briefly of in past or before the show, when tragedy happens, when trauma happens, man, a lot of people go silent.
Yeah, people don't know what to say. It's hard.
It is hard. It's hard until you practice. And even kid. Even then it's hard. But because most of the time we do have insight of that tragedy prior to the communication, that's where we can really navigate and say, ask ourselves a question: do I want to leave them higher, or do I want to push them back down in the hole? And if we're intentional with our words, it's all about energy. Every little bit of about energy. Are we giving them an energy that's heavy and they have to hold on to that again or revisit it again? Or are we giving them something to move forward with? And people understand. And if we can break that pattern a little bit and move them forward, I think that's the best way I can answer that question. And I'll also say, as many times I've done that correctly, I've done it wrong.
I know, but I think sometimes you do just have to do it wrong. I shared a story someone told me a long time ago, 10 years ago or something, where they lost a child, a 3-year-old, tragedy. And just nobody said anything to them because everybody was too scared of saying the wrong thing. And that was kind of, he understood that that's why they were doing it, not that they didn't care. But sometimes, at least letting people know that you're there is, and giving it a go, even if you might say something wrong, right?
Yeah. Because the person who is dealing with that tragedy, they already feel isolated.
Yeah.
So any support, they will understand it, but it's better than no support.
We've got in the chat here, sometimes I use grief is just love with nowhere to go. Yeah.
So and I think every one of us has, as we're just bringing that conversation up, if we just think about it, I guess moving forward, we're going to be, we're going to have a situation where it's uncomfortable. But if it somehow just comes from this massive place of love and you're not really thinking about, concern yourself so much doing it wrong, is making sure that you just pour some love into it. And then maybe, then it always comes out. It always lands right.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next question. Remind me of nutrients that are lost with beta blockers and water pills.
And what kind of pills?
Water pills.
Water pills. Okay, so any water pill that you're going to take, electrolytes right off the bat.
Okay.
So that's going to pull the water out, which means that we're going to take a molecular, like an osmotic pressure change. So we got to be really mindful of that, especially things like sodium. Because usually people are taking water pills thinking they can't eat, it can't have any sodium. The challenge is then you can't absorb potassium. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to create, muscle imbalance and cramping and all that kind of stuff. So very, very careful with those things. And the beta blockers, CoQ10 we blocked out, B vitamin. There's a lot of nutrient deficiencies that'll take place when we do either one. Especially with the water pills, you're going to create an imbalance in pH levels. You're going to create an imbalance in electrolytes. So, but I love the question. That's strategy right there. There's times when we need these different medications. And again, I never want to come across saying that we can't take anything ever, but to think about it in that perspective and in that light, that's the conversation that needs to be had, and do a deeper dive. And I'll be more than happy if that individual ever wants to reach out and we go a little bit deeper. Then not only what are we blocking out, but how do we reverse engineer and get them in without interfering with the job that medication might need to be there to do.
Yeah, and I'll find the episode, because we did go through some of those deficiencies that different medications do. So we can have another look at. You can have another look at that as well.
Awesome.
Okay, next question. How do you navigate a fad diet world?
How do I navigate a fad diet world? Is that what you said? Something like that? Yeah. So, this goes back to what we say every time on this show, Karen, is that, so fad diets, I'm all right with fad diets, especially the ones that have been coming up these last couple of years. We'll say fad. I don't think they're going to be fad. I think they're going to stick around. I think things like plant-based, I think things like keto, I think things like vegan and vegetarian and carnivore, they're all here to stay. And I'm going to explain why. Interesting enough, I talked about carnivore a couple of weeks back, and I really meant to share with everyone that I wasn't necessarily saying carnivore is the next best diet to do. That's not what I was saying. I was really trying to emphasize that really what we all need to look at is what we call the SAD diet, the standard American diet. If we just choose to navigate away from that, and wherever you go away from the standard American diet is a good place. So God's garden is the foundation. Those fad diets, I think that's almost unfair for some of them because they're scientifically sturdy. Like there's some good research about these. So I want to share with you. So really, how do you deal with fad diet? Just get back to basics. Get back to God's garden. So let me share with you guys, and I think some of you were here when I was talking about the carnivore diet. So all in one day, I probably spent about 4 or 5 hours, split the time between a deep dive into all the research, all the advocates, everything I can come up on vegan and vegetarianism, more than I've already done in my 25 years. So just a deeper dive. I was looking for more science, and it was really some compelling things from the group that there was a movie called, what was it called? Game Changer.
Game Changers, yeah.
A couple years ago it came out, and there's a lot of controversy back and forth with it. And then there's, of course, there's this book written by this guy, I forget his name, Mark something, Carnivore Diet.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so there's couldn't be any more opposite, right? Vegan versus carnivore. And a very interesting thing is that they both, when it came to the results, had incredible results in getting people to lose weight, both of them. Had people get less heart disease, both of them. Had less diabetes, both of them. All the above. So why is this? How could a carnivore diet and a vegetarian diet work? Is because where they came from. We're taking individuals who basically had a standard American diet, a crap diet that was poisoning and making the human body sicker, and change it to anything whole food, and you will get results. Anything. If you go back to God's garden. Now, do I recommend using the full garden? Of course I do. That's always been our platform here. So, but in that garden, there's vegetables, and in that diet, there's animals. And if you want to eat a whole bunch of animals for a while, there's people that, and science and results that'll show you that works really good for some people. And then if you want to eat vegetables for a long period of time, and that's all you want to eat, there's also the same thing there, that there's a lot of results showing that people do this successfully on a regular basis. No one is better than the other. I think that's the message I want to share with people. So when I say fad diets, I've heard literally there was a grape diet. Did you hear about that one?
There's a chocolate diet. That one sounds good to me.
Yeah. So those, I'm like, come on, let's there was a grape diet, or a black bean diet. And I was like, you gotta be kidding. Wouldn't want to live in that house.
Yeah, right.
So there's those things, yeah, they're fad, but when we're looking at things that are still paleo diet, fantastic, all of those do make sense. And then we use those different ones. You use a carnivore, you use a vegetarian, you use paleo, you use Mediterranean as strategies at this point to get
therapeutic diets. You use it for a specific thing.
Yes. And then the other part, and maybe the most important part, is you find out what works best for you.
Yeah.
But I still do not know of any diet that is proclaiming you eat crap.
No.
Right?
No, it's the biggest thing that makes the difference.
Yeah.
Just take out sugar and processed food diet. Wow, suddenly you feel so much better.
Yeah. So again, even though there's the Whole30, all of them, because they're eating food. So to take away that confusion and to take away from, and I get it though, because I literally spent an entire day listening to polar opposite agreements backed by their science. Both of them.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Man, if I was, and I was asking different, my brain was asking different questions. All right. The vegans, they were all because why? Because they stopped eating, they started eating vegetables and stopped eating all processed food, and they stopped going to McDonald's. Or they, when that movie, The Game Changers, pointed at meat being bad, but they didn't get to measure it against people that ate grass-fed beef. And so here's an interesting thing. When we do studies on meat eaters versus vegetarian, in general, and this is a real important part to understand about these different diets. In general, people who eat meat are less mindful about their health collectively than people who are vegetarians. Yeah. So for example, vegetarians, they might be well, I'm just going to eat plants in theory, right?
Because they've made a decision about what they're eating. They're thinking about it at least.
Right.
The meat eaters are just eating whatever.
We'll also have a diet soda and the French fries that go with the meat. And that part of it is not studied in any single study. I've yet to come across a single standalone study that has done over time people that just eat meat. We know cultures, and that's where there's a lot of success. There are cultures where the entire all they do is they only have meat and stuff like that, and they do really good. But that's the challenge there. So fundamentally, the meat eaters are also not such healthy, mindful eaters and will eat the French fries and all the things that go with it. So it's not fair to say when a doctor says stay away from meat, because if then they go and they don't get the burger, but they still get the French fries and the soda, like we still have a problem here. Yeah.
There's just some really horrible quality meat too, right? Like I think just meat out of all the foods you want to go like organic, grass-fed, whatever, like meat's got to be up there, right? With one of the first things you change. Not only because I mean it's the beef industry when it's not grass-fed and organic, I mean it's like chicken coops. Like how can that be good for your body at all, right?
It's brutal, but when we really look
Yeah.
at bigness, like it's bad. And then so we don't have that bad of vegetables, but we do have processed foods that the vegetarians are eating that are just as
Yeah.
so when
Just
we
as bad.
yeah, so when we talk about all these different processed foods and we talk about so meat, it doesn't cause diabetes. The biggest issue we have in the world right now is diabetes.
Yeah, it's
So
crazy.
that's a carbohydrate problem.
Yeah.
That is not a meat problem, not even a bad meat problem. That is a carbohydrate problem. So again, the answer is God's garden. Keep it clean. Get back to fundamentals of like if it comes from a root plant tree, walks in the garden, swims in the sea, we eat it. And then find out what works for you, like what works for you. And I found some things that work pretty good for my body. I told everyone that I was going to do a carnivore diet. I can't do it. I like vegetables too much.
Nice. There you go.
So I didn't really give it like my all either. But I have incorporated a little bit more. I've become like a master burger maker lately. Like
Right. Burgers at your house.
ridiculous, like through the roof, like award-winning type stuff.
Okay, so you'll have to share your recipe with us cleansers in New Year.
Might just be like burger. That could be
Burger. Got it. All right.
bacon, and I do some other.
Although no burgers in the beginning of the cleanse anyway, right? Sorry.
True, yeah. There's no burgers ends, period. Yeah. So I'm getting them all in right now.
Okay. I love it. I love it. All right, let's do the next question. How do you know the difference between whole food supplements and herbs and synthetic ones?
Great question. So whole food and synthetic supplements. This is a bigger deal than we probably talk about. And really what it means when you go to the vitamin store or when you go to Publix or a grocery store and there's rows and rows and rows of vitamins, there's a good chance they're synthetic. And what does that really mean to you? It means that they're made from chemicals. They're compounds, that they're not necessarily made from nature. They're not in the whole food philosophy that we're talking about. So the simplest way, Karen, the very, very first thing we can do is when you pick up your vitamin bottle is look for the ingredients. And that's not the assay. That's not where it says ascorbic acid and how much, RDA. That's not that part. Look underneath that and look at the ingredients. And you should see things that say, let's say it's a B vitamin. B vitamins, the best source of B vitamins come from liver. You might see bovine liver. You might see porcine liver. You might see, wheat barley, some other things that, you can get B vitamins from. Organ meats are, usually great sources of them. But that's the first place we look at it. And super important because what happens when we take synthetics, typically they're isolates. So meaning that the vitamin C, they'll isolate the ascorbic acid. That's another way. If you see things that are in their chemical names, cyanocobalamin, which is vitamin B12, that's a chemical name for B12. If you see ascorbic acid, that's the chemical name for vitamin C. If you see them in those names, that typically also means that it's a chemical compound. The challenge is when they take an isolate or they get it synthetically, they match the molecular structure. The way that vitamins, minerals, and herbs work in our body, they work as a collective group, as an enzyme, technically. Herbs are a little bit different, but vitamins and minerals together, they collectively are the way they operate in the body is as an enzyme. So when we separate one piece off of it, like ascorbic acid, say that's part of the vitamin C enzyme, unfortunately now your body has to make that active in your body. It has to go collect the other guys that it's missing. And that might be vitamin P, vitamin J, bioflavonoids, whatever it may be. And then so it takes from your body. And then you can utilize it as vitamin C. So that's another way. We want to look at the ingredients. You want to look at the names. There's a tricky little word you can look for. If you see something that says as, you see something that says like B complex or thiamine, before, whatever it may be, as, and then it says whatever that, if you see that word as, that also means that that's a synthetic vitamin. So again, the ingredients usually is a telltale, because oftentimes there are no ingredients on synthetic vitamins, which is, you're like, oh, really? So where do they come from? They make them in a laboratory. So oftentimes, and that's where it gets tricky. I don't argue with a lot of the science that's out there that have studied supplementation, and they say a lot of it doesn't work. And I understand it because they're studying synthetic supplementation. And so therefore the results are very, very mixed. It's way different than supplying your body with whole food vitamins, minerals, herbs, and nutrients that your body can utilize, just like the way it came in nature. So a big deal. Sometimes the whole food companies will cost a little bit more because they got to go through an entirely different process to maintain the integrity of those nutrients. So and that's one of the reasons, Karen, that I've been such a fan of the way Standard Process does things. I've been up on their farms a couple of times. So I'm a geek when it comes to
that's amazing.
And I've put my fingers in the soil, and it's just literally fascinating on how they process and what care and passion and pride that they take in doing what they do. And there's some other companies out there that are whole food, none that I know of to that degree, and that quality of soil as well. So for the most part, that's the biggest. It's whole versus part. It's the word as, it's the ingredients you look for. So those things, that'll let you know whether or not something's synthetic.
Okay. I got a kind of follow-up question just here. Any thoughts on moringa?
Moringa, yeah, it's good herb. We I like it. We can often use like moringa to, add to a smoothie or something like that. So again, in the whole food world, yeah, I think we even use a little bit over in our cafe for some of our smoothies as an add-on. So yeah.
And turkey burgers, you a fan?
Turkey burgers, yeah, the fatter the better. So instead of the real lean ones, go for the fatter. They'll taste better, and you want to keep that fat. Remember, if we get a real lean meat and we cook the fat out of it, you won't be satiated, because the only thing that's going to satiate us is either the carbohydrate sugar part. So we're going to eat those burgers without the buns, and then and that's part of, I think, the fun of it. Like the burgers I make, my wife and I just literally just eat the burgers. It's so interesting. So we're doing this like we found this farmer who, like, it's not, he hasn't gone through all the testing for organic, but everything's organic. And for the smaller farmers, that's oftentimes the way that it is, because it's cost so much money to go through jump through those hoops. Yet I've been making burgers, and my wife usually doesn't do good with grass-fed beef, even when I get them from Whole Foods and stuff. But man, great digestion, feel great afterwards. Like, I can't wait to make my next one. I'm so excited. Yeah.
I love it. All right. Well, we are we're out of time. So let's go on to our next question, which is our last question. What is the one action listeners can take to move them towards their goal of becoming superhuman?
It's a reminder to be proactive. And that is, it's not always sexy to be proactive. That is getting a little extra rest. That is taking your supplements. That is going to that yoga class. That is using the correct words. That's proactive. It is choosing to be intentional. It's choosing to, where we're putting our energy. So that is what proactive is. And it's not always sexy in the sense of it's instant gratification. So proactive through these holidays. January 1, let's be in the best shape ever. Let's peak on January 1, move into the best year next year.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. My voice is going to be back next week.
Nice.
For another episode of the Health Made Simple show. We'll see you next week.
Appreciate you guys all, and keep doing your thing. Keep sharing out, keep spreading love, take deliberate action for the mind, the body, overall wellness. Y'all be awesome.